All right. Hello. For those of you who are new to the channel, my name's Al, Gothman, just all sorts of names, AJB3Art on Instagram. Many of you know me from the KOS, the Knights of Samaria, which is the Evil Dead Facebook group, but for those of you who've been coming here, this is where I share a lot of the other cosplay stuff I do, a lot of the prop building that I do, different crap, musical stuff, all sorts of stuff. So we have a bunch of Star Wars stuff today. The first thing I wanted to really just show is I did get my hands on both versions of Baby Yoda. So this is the Disney Store pre-order. This is the Target and Walmart and general retailer pre-order. And I have the green screen background because I always have it up behind me, but obviously since they're green, I'm not going to put any kind of fancy background up in this video or anything, otherwise Yoda would disappear. The main difference you see between the Disney Store and the general retailer, and this has been highlighted a few times, in all ways, shape, and forms, the general retailer is darker. It's a darker coat of green. It's a darker fabric. It's, I would describe it in real life, a little bit more of a darker grayish tone to it than a darker tan. This is a very tan, light tan, but it has more saturation than this. This one has a lot more gray to it in terms of its wovenness. Same with the around the neck fuzzies. So people have asked, you know, what's the difference? The Target and Walmart guys, a little greener, a little darker wardrobe, a little lighter overall. To be honest with you, maybe it's because I've had it longer. I kind of like the pre-order Disney Store one. There's, you know, the rosy cheeks, the rosy lips, the ears. They just kind of look, I don't know, something. It's bright, it's happy, it's a very nice looking Yoda. This is just greener. It just looks more like a Yoda. I don't think anybody would be disappointed with either version, but I am happy with the one that I picked up. And then this particular one is actually a friend's, so I'll be giving them that one. And the carrier is the same for both. Now, the next thing I'm going to talk about, which is I posted to a Facebook group and a bunch of people asked me if I would do a tutorial. Most of you have been coming to this page, watch me build Necros, you know how I do this. But for a lot of the Star Wars fans, this is a new experience. So, for all my Star Wars followers, sure. This is my custom version of this, the Jedi Path. For those of you who don't know, there's two versions of these books. One is the matte fabric covered version that you could just buy, has the Star Wars logo up top. Then there was the special edition version that comes with a leather cover that, well, it's not leather, but it looks like leather. It does not have the logo on it. And it only came in the Vault version. So there was the Sith Holocron Vault version there for the Book of the Sith, and there was a Jedi version for this, and I don't have that version, the Vault version. I might get it one day just to have it, because I do have the Sith one, because I really, you know, was all about that. So picked that up immediately. But I've had this book for a long time, and I liked it. I even wrote in the book and made notes as my character, a Jedi Master, who will be revealed on this page in a web series that I'm currently filming. And I just never really displayed it or kept it because it has the Star Wars logo on it, so it wasn't really like a prop, but the pages read like a prop. And then when they released the Sacred Jedi texts in The Last Jedi and then The Rise of Skywalker, I was just in love with that because I'm a book guy. I love prop books, so I was just like, yay. When I went to Galaxy's Edge, I immediately picked up this, which was the Jedi version of a sacred text, but it's a journal. The cover actually in their text says wisdom. So that's what that says. And it's a kind of a weird thing because I'm also an Avatar The Last Airbender fan. And what it is it's the Jedi symbol in the middle and then the 4 elements around it. So a little bit of Fifth Element, a little bit of Avatar Last Airbender. Picked it up immediately because it was the closest thing to a replica you can get. It is traditionally bound. It is made of MDF board. It's not made of wood. It might be particle board, actually. It might be compressed wood. It's hard to tell. But it's not straight up wood. This is wood. And I, of course, this is not made by me. This was made by an Italian maker. You can buy these on Etsy. I think they're like 80 bucks. I happened to see one on eBay. Somebody was selling it off extremely underpriced. And I was like, do you know how good that is? All right, so I bought it right away. It came with a specific set of innards. It came with this, which I can show you has traditional segment binding. So it's very well bound. The person in Italy who makes these does a great job with their binding. It also had a red cloth over it, a blue cloth, so that it was fabric bound as well, which is a way you can keep your spine preserved. It didn't have any bulge stitches or anything like that, so there's no additional twine run around the back to do that. Just didn't need it, really. And the first page was one of the pages of the sacred Jedi text that was revealed in The Last Jedi. Problem. This particular book, which has this spine, which is visible in the film, it's whitewashed in the film, doesn't contain these pages. It was not one that was opened. We know which one was opened now, and which one Luke revealed, and so it wasn't this one. And it's just an empty journal, and the pages are pristine, so it doesn't really look like a sacred text. So I knew as soon as I got it, I was going to rip the spine out. My problem was, what the hell was I going to put in it? So when I ripped the spine out, I realized that this, which was laser cut, was really, really, really deep into the piece, and the wood started to split and everything. Now, normally that doesn't bother me because it's supposed to be an old book, so I just simply went in, reinforced it with some foam and like wood plastic, and just sort of reformatted it. And it's fine because it's supposed to look beat to shit. It's old. It's supposed to be like thousands of years old. Went over it, weathered it heavily. It's really called breaking down. I mean, weathered in this case because it's actually supposed to resemble weather. Some edges, some splatter, inside and out. It had a bit of a blue-green hue to it. But the main thing I wanted to do was inside the spine, I put a piece of foam. And the reason I do that, and it's just simple 2mm foam, thin strips so that it's not overlapping the stitching. Why did I do that? I knew that I wasn't going to do a float bind. A float bind is, actually I have a Necronomicon here, I can show you that. A float bind is like this. These are the Necronomicons that I make at the KOS page. And a float bind means you have a double page here and here, and that page sticks to your binding along here, so you've bound the pages, they sit, and then you have a nice big page here, and a nice big page here, and it's not actually glued into your spine. You do that when you want the thing to yawn open and really look nice with your pages. So you stitch up your binding, you put it in the middle, and then those two folded pages grab it for like just about half a centimeter on either end of the binding, and then it sort of just floats above the spine. That's called a float bind. There's other names for it, but that's what us non-really real bookmakers call it. So I knew I wasn't going to do that. I knew I was going to glue the pages directly onto the spine for this one. Now that is a very easy bind to do, but it limits how your pages look. So I wanted it to have some movement. So by adding a layer of foam first, and then I cover that in burlap, and then I wrap my binding pages with some burlap, I create that porous connection where when I lay down my contact cement on either side, it will adhere better. And it gives me just a little bit of squish and give so that I can manipulate the spine a little bit. If you just glued this flat onto wood, it's just on there and your pages aren't going to open as well as they could. So it created a little bit of flexibility. So the first thing that occurred to me was just print pages. And I thought about running the Star Wars script in Arabesh, a handwritten font Arabesh, and I thought about all these different things. But then I have to weather 600 pages and things like that, and that just really gets old really quick. Plus, I'm making those necros, and I just was like, that's a lot of weathering, and I don't really want to do it. And then when I saw that I had this, I thought, well, maybe I'll just see if this size matches this size. And I was lucky, the person who built the book, they are the same size. So I knew I could get this into this. So what I did was, and this actually had a float bind, which made my life easier. I went in and I cut the two floating pages out. And so what that did was, you could see that a little bit of the spine reinforcement came too, but it allowed me to pull out the entire Last Jedi text without wrecking, the Jedi Path text, without destroying any of the pages. And then I ripped off some of the ones I didn't want and stuff, and I was ready to go. I didn't want any of the copyright or any of that stuff. I wanted it to look like a sacred text, sort of. So, and then I kept this because I thought maybe I would throw the guts from the notebook into this and still have it. So I don't even know if I'm doing that, but that's what's going on. If you don't have this cover, or you don't want to buy this cover on Etsy from the Italian shop that makes it, if you were to pick up this from Galaxy's Edge, or now you can get them online, you should not pay more than $30 for this. That's what they retail at Galaxy's Edge. $35 max. This, honestly, will do it. This is just fine. This will work great. It's got a leather binding and everything. You will need to weather this. I personally would spray paint the whole fucking thing and then start from scratch and re-weather it. You can just go over it with washes. I mean, they did try to weather it. They did a good job for a mass-produced product that's, cheap. But in reality, if you want to use this, I would take this in and do a job on this a little bit. But as you can see with the notebook on this is exactly what we're talking about. It's glued directly to the spine. So when you rip this off, it might do a number on your spine and your wooden spine here. So I recommend hit it with a heat gun, get an X-Acto knife, and do your best to work it off. But it is just glue, so it's machine glued. It should be all right. The alphabet in the front with this is actually an embossed Jedi symbol on it. It's a nice prop, to be honest with you. But if you want to do what I did, this is the quickest and easiest way to pick up a cover. You can make your own. Just make sure that you measure out the dimensions for the paper. So if you're going to build a cover that's replacing this, measure this cover and make sure it's within reason of that. So we had the cover. We had the spine with a strip of foam and a strip of burlap laid over that. We took the Jedi pages and we started to weather them individually. What's the quick and easy way to weather pages when you're trying to make this happen? So that I will show you, because this is kind of the tricky part. The good news is it's super simple. You start with a page. I'll start with the back page. And you crumple it. Careful not to rip it out of the thing. And you don't just want it to be a vertical crumpling, so work from the corners in towards the page. And you can see already I ripped that out, so you got to be careful. But because I'm like holding it and trying to display it. But then you simply flatten it out once you've crumpled it. And then you take a sanding block and you sand over it. I prefer a high grit sanding block, like a 60 or an 80. I guess you'd call that a low grit. I'm referring to a rough sanding block. You don't get like a 200 or a 300. That's not going to help you. And then you really want to go and focus on titles, big blocks of titles, and images. Weather the images. Now, what that does is those wrinkles create elevation in the page. And so when the sanding block goes over it, it catches it and starts to weather and sand that out. Also, you want to sand down and away from all your edges. So you do that front and back on every page. Make sure you're flat and make sure that when you're sanding, you are not pulling the page out of your binding, because you're just going to rip the page out, and that's a whole other issue. If you do a little bit of tearing, don't worry about it. Tearing is okay. Work it. If you get a tear like this, do a fold or something and really make it look worn. Use your mistakes to your advantage. So that basic crumpling and sanding will give you this effect, because I didn't draw on all these. So let me find here we go. So that'll give you this effect. So as you can see, and this is very thin paper in the Jedi publication. The thicker the paper you use, the better this shit comes out. But you can see it does create a bit of an aged look. And in some cases, because this is printed a certain way, this isn't laser print, this is like inked. It's gonna pull some of that ink out and, dye the page a little bit and actually make it look older, which is good. Because if that happens enough, you don't have to go in later and age it. But if you want to age it, once you've done that, you'll notice that this page has some aging on it. What is that? Well, once you have crinkled up your pages, you'll get the thickness that you want. After you have the thickness of the pages, I recommend, and I hate doing this and I hate saying this, but they did do it in the movie, so you kind of have to. You got to burn. I hate burned weathering. It's tacky, in my opinion, because how many old things get burned, really? Like, burned? Like, how often does an old document ever really touch fire? And so I feel like burning is a cheap way to create weathering, and I don't use it often. I rip and I stain. I don't burn. However, it seems that the the Jedi texts were recovered from some kind of a fire and were actually burned, because in the movie they were burned. So in this case, it's okay, and I felt a little better about it. So I went in and I just did some very, very controlled burns. Now, the thing you want to do is you do want to burn some in bulk, some individually. So for example, the first page, this one piece here is burned individually. This whole section burned at the same time. And when they're burning, I like to smack out as much of the blackenedness as possible, because over time, that shit's just going to fall off. It's charcoal. Once you've done that, I also like to take shoe polish and just go on all the edges and catch as much of it, so it darkens the edges and creates a little bit of dirt. I don't shoe polish the actual pages. That's too harsh. But I like to use wood stain. Something like a golden oak, for example, is a good one. You know, the liquid stuff in a squishy tube that you get in Michael's in the woodworking section. Take a sponge, a coral sponge, a regular Scotch sponge, whatever. Get a little on your sponge and start rubbing in areas. You want to stick to edges. You don't want to start in the middle. You want to avoid the middle as much as you can, and you don't really want to get in on the spine. There's not going to be any weathering in the spine of a book, because that's the one area that never catches any light. It's always the edges. It's always the outer rim, and so we just work the outer rim. Now, once you've done that, you can really go as crazy as you want. You can make each page its own irregular shape and tear and stain and tear and stain, and if you really want to get that sort of black look like some of the pages had in Last Jedi, you can go in with black shoe polish or black wash, put it on the sponge, just sort of sponge it in, sponge it in, sponge it in, and create all these kind of burns. I have an example of some of that. So something more heavily weathered, see if I can find, so for example, if we look at this page, this is a torn page, and the weathering bleeds from one page to the next. It shows the age of how long that sat closed. And where's an example? So a little bit more like the black in the upper corner. Unfortunately, this is going to wash out. And where's one of those like really destroyed ones that I did? Some of the pages bothered me so much I really wrecked them. I made them look pretty nasty. You know, this one in the middle a little bit, you see a lot more of the splatter, but you can get really, really dark. Oh, here we go. So like a lot of that blackening up top there, you could do that and it'll make a really nice effect. Now, once you've kind of gotten the character and the pages the way you want, you gotta stick it in the spine. So what I do is, you'll notice this particular, if you're gonna do gluing it into the spine, you're not gonna float wrap it, then you gotta wrap, I recommend wrapping your binding in fabric. So you really wanna take your pages and you wanna take a strip of fabric and literally glue it into the spine and then wrap maybe 1/2 centimeter along the edges and just hug your binding. And pick an old looking natural fibered cloth, preferably weather the cloth, because you want it to look old as well. So something linen looking is good. I like burlap just because it's really ugly and it catches the glue and it frays, so it really looks old quickly. It's not the most sturdy of shit, but it does have a very, very particular look to it. So, you know, and then you coat your spine with, of course, your spine of your book, contact cement, coat the pages, spine, contact cement, let them dry to tackiness, attach. Once you've done that, your shit is bound and you're ready to rock and roll. And then, as hard as it is, pick a few pages and permanently destroy areas, make blotches, splatches, burn a hole, just tear a piece away that you'll never know what it says again. All the writing shouldn't be preserved. But what that creates is a very nice accordioned, nice thick book, but it's a cheat because if you look at how thin the spine is literally half the size of this book. But because we did that fluffing with the crumpling of the pages, you accordion out and get a much bigger thickness. So when you slide this in and you display it, the thickness is an illusion. It creates the irregularity. It creates the old and ancient looking aspect you want out of the sacred text. And the beauty of this is if you have a bunch of Star Wars books that you like that have non-glossy pages, cloth, like actual paper pages, not like high gloss visual dictionary pages. Don't do this with visual dictionary, it won't work. But you can put all those, your favorite Star Wars books, novels even, into your custom Sacred Jedi text and build yourself an 8-volume set of texts. And the innards is going to be all Jedi text. Something else that you may want to do is you may want to actually create Sacred Jedi text replica pages. And for that, you need reference material, preferably by the visual dictionaries. Scan, blow them up to appropriate 8.5 by 11 size, then trace them as best you can. Create the vellum actually, this goes this way. Create the vellum overlay the way it's supposed to look. These actually go here. Let me just line this up. Yeah, so this actually overlays like this in reality, and because it was a vellum sheet, I could see what was underneath it. So on this page, it was very easy to determine what's on it. Now, this is on tracing paper because I traced over the blown up scan, and then this, I put a white back behind it, scanned that. Now it's digitally in my computer. I can manipulate it and pre-weather it, age it to something that looks like this, for example. This would be an example of digital weathering. I age the paper prior to printing it. Then when it prints out, I go ahead and age it again. So this is an example of what you could do with that. And of course I have the Wayfinder page as well, and the piece of vellum that overlays that in as well, which goes up here. So I've already started working on that particular book. So some stuff you may want to make your own pages and hand weather them and hand bind them and hope to God you made enough pages to fill your book. But when you're looking for a quick cheat and you know that you never saw the inside of it, but you want it on your shelf and you already have a book you like and you say, man, I could combine those two and make a cover. This is a quick way to take a book you already have, make it old, and sort of turn it into that. So, The Jedi Path is a really fun book. If you've never read it, it basically is just sort of like a kid's book that explains the philosophies of the Jedi Order. I don't believe it's canon I hate that word. It's not canon anymore, but it also has notes from a series of Jedi Masters. So all the people who wrote in it, and this was pre-Disney buyout, this book. So it's got Yoda, Tame Cerulean, Dooku, Qui-Gon Jinn, Obi-Wan Kenobi, Anakin Skywalker, Ahsoka Tano, Darth Sidious, Luke Skywalker, and then me at the bottom. I made some notes too in character. So it's a cool book, and I've always enjoyed it, and I decided I wanted to stick it into a Sacred Jedi text, and now I've got one. And so this will be the first book featured in my little web series that I'm doing, and you'll see that in the near future. So again, if you get this from Galaxy's Edge, and you get this from anywhere, eBay, Amazon, bookstore, Barnes & Noble, you can take the pages from this and stick it into this and make yourself a custom Jedi Path Jedi text. This would be a perfectly appropriate cover for the pages of the Jedi Path. So that's how I did it. It's really not that hard. You rip your spine out, so you have your pages, you crumple, you flatten, you sand, and then you take golden oak and you just sort of catch the edges. You can use distressed ink sprays, different things like that to age it. And you do that with every single page. Every page. Oh. And then when you're done, you rebind it, glue it back into your new spine. And you can glue it directly to the wooden spine, or you can float bind it, which would require you to do a double bind where you cover this with if this was 8.5 by 5.5, you would take an 8.5 by 11, cover this page entirely, have it bleed over like this, and then just glue this part of the double page to the rest of your stuff, and then it will hold it and literally float it in the middle of the book. Now, if it's an ancient book, or it's supposed to be, they didn't have that back then, so it looks kind of stupid. But it's Star Wars, who the hell knows, we can do whatever we want. I have actually also, full disclosure, if you have a spine or a cover set you really like, but you don't want to commit to exactly what pages you want, you could do this, which is pretty cool. For example, I have a Army of Darkness Necronomicon, which I don't always keep the same pages in. magnets. I have magnets literally glued into the spine, and then depending on what I want to put in there, I just clip them in, and then that's my book. Sometimes I put AVED pages in there. Sometimes I just put this remake in there, just a whole place because it came into my possession. And then it just sort of is a placeholder. That's all it is. So you can use magnets to do your binding as well if it's not something you want to be permanent. Again, you just put earth magnets on the spine of your pages like this, and then glue a piece of cloth over it so that the magnets are exposed, and then put equal spots in your spine magnets. I use magnets 2 inches apart. So, and I usually do it in the middle of the book. From the middle of the book, measure up 1 inch, measure down 1 inch. That's where I put my 2 magnets. The reason being is no matter how big my pages are, the connection is always the same and they're universal. So makes my life easier. Hopefully it'll make yours easier. If you're interested in learning more about Necronomicon from Ash vs. Evil Dead or an Army of Darkness Necronomicon, please visit thenightsofsamaria.com and check out our forum or join us on Facebook, Knights of Samaria fans of Ash vs. Evil Dead. I'll be happy to go over more of the builds and the limited runs where you can purchase these if you want. If you're interested in more videos on Baby Yodas or Star Wars oriented props, stay here. Check out my Instagram at AJB3Art. That's where I post all that stuff. I do not have a Facebook group that I keep to. I am a big fan of Batu Kyber collectors, Kyber crystal collectors. I apologize, I don't remember it off the top of my head, but it's basically Batu crystal collectors. It's a really good group. They're very positive. They don't just do crystals, but that's predominantly what they do, custom crystals. Like it a lot. I enjoy the page. Sacred Jedi text. I am not making these. I am not reproducing these. However, if you have a book, if you have a cover and you have pages and you just want them assembled and weathered and aged, I do that. So you can hit me up if that's something that you want done. Do not post and say, PM me, I want to talk pricing. You have to message me. I'm not going to go hunt you down. Quite frankly, I don't need the money. I have quite a few orders with the Necronomicons and things, and I'm pretty busy, so I'm not going to hunt anybody down for an order. If you have something you would like me to do, happy to help you out, but you got to come find me. I'm not going to look for you. Like I said, I don't need it. But I am very excited to have some props and begin the Sacred Jedi text collection that I want to do. I also want to take a brief minute to mention, if you are interested in just purchasing Sacred Jedi texts, the best ones, not only the only ones I've seen, but the best ones I've seen for what they cost, Star Wars Prop Store on Etsy. Glorious looking, fantastic looking. I believe they're $250 a book. They're not fully paged, but the pages that are included are replica pages, and they look great, and the covers look great. Again, really close to accurate. Like, a lot of effort, a lot of consistency from build to build. Really, really like it a lot. I think they're $225 actually, $250, $225, but way less than I would charge for it. If I give you a full book, you know, people who are buying this from me, this is $450, this complete Necronomicon. So, because that's my time. I do 12 of them. So this guy's producing them, and they're glorious, and he's casted his own covers for some of them, and they look great. So if that's a book you want, I definitely recommend picking that up from him. Otherwise, if you're looking for just more tips on weathering and how to do all that, you can hit me up. But hopefully you enjoyed this little half hour of me rambling. Sorry that I didn't do any actual live demonstration of me doing it. I haven't really worked out how to do that without a cameraman yet. I don't know how to do that myself, of you just seeing me doing the build. Maybe I won't, I don't know. But like I said, you know, weathering can be done. You could do a combination. You know, you could do a combination of digital and practical weathering for a very, very beat to shit look. Or you can weather pre-existing for a moderately weathered look. Personally, it's one or the other, but they're all very convincing looking. So thanks for tuning in. Hopefully in the near future, we'll have some ghost stuff and some more Star Wars stuff. So thanks a lot and have a good day.